Time for another board recap podcast. Dr. Smith, happy second day of school to you.
Thank you very much. Been a great start to the school year.
Really was fun yesterday, and that really takes us into good news because for last night's board meeting, I kind of just briefly shared an overview. I know you and I were both at Highland School yesterday morning, and then I know you visited several schools both yesterday and today. And just quick recap, what's your takeaway from that?
Lots of smiles. Everyone commented on the tremendous benefit of the soft start, at least what we call the soft start, being able to develop that sense of belonging, the relationships with their students and their staff is so important to the success of students throughout the school year. So lots of smiles, lots of positivity. It was a great first day back, and it's been a great day today too.
Wonderful. And then, of course, we're posting this on Tuesday, and that means then on Wednesday and Thursday, we actually have two more kind of first day of schools because the second half of our alphabet will be here. So looking forward to those just as much as well.
Absolutely. And then Friday, we'll bring it all together.
Okay, great. So we'll move into the rest of last night's agenda. Then we had public comment, and that was tied in some way to then action item Dr. Smith 3.01, consideration of leave of absence. You want to just elaborate on that a bit?
Certainly. So this is a very unusual situation. It's been certainly very public in the last week plus that Trustee Word had been accused of some criminal activity. So because of that, the board had requested her resignation because, frankly, in state law, the board cannot end the term of another board member, and I think that's for very, very good reason.
Because they are each elected individuals.
Absolutely, yeah. So there are only two reasons why a board member can be removed. One is if they are convicted of a felony, and two, if they truly do abandon their position. So we did take some time in information item 1.04 to have our attorney, Pat Shoulders, just state all of that for the public and to help the public that was gathered. There were about 25 patrons in the audience last night to understand what the board can and cannot do. And then we went from that into public comment, and we had 3 patrons that spoke last night in public comment. And then moving on to action 3.01 was actually the consideration of the leave of absence. So Trustee Word had submitted a request for an unpaid leave for the board's consideration, and then action item 3.01, the board did vote on that last night, and it was 6-0 to accept her request for a leave of absence.
And as we've said many times before, we're very fortunate to have such an expert in legal counsel, Pat Shoulders. He's been with us over 30 years, and certainly his expertise to help guide us through a situation like this has been very beneficial for both for the board, for President Kiefer, and so that certainly helped with this process.
Certainly was, and to Pat's credit, he also reached out to Lisa Tansdale, who's the lead counsel for the Indiana School Board Association, and she had actually written an article just a few years back about the very topic of board removal and what would have to take place. So he also had copies of that for the media or for anyone in attendance if they wanted to take a copy. So I appreciate his thoroughness. Nobody wins in this situation, but and I think emotions always run high. We must adhere to the state laws that we have and to the policies and protocols that are in place, and that certainly was attended to last night.
And I do think one last thing, Mr. Shoulders made it clear to everyone there last night and to the board that for the foreseeable future, until this situation works itself through, we'll operate with a 6-member school board and things will continue very much as normal.
Yes.
Okay. That takes us then, we're still in action item, Dr. Smith, so if we'll go to 3.02.
Yes, that is the consideration to approve the CTE program of studies, and David Sinclair presented that. So we had I think a tremendous opportunity to approve additional courses that are actually offered through Ivy Tech. As you know, we have a really outstanding program in early college at Ivy Tech, and that's just a great accelerator for our students that want to have an accelerated education. Early college is a perfect example for that because we have students that graduate from Ivy Tech with their associate's degree, and then a week later will graduate with their high school diploma. So we were adding some courses that will align to career and technical ed pathways. Specifically, Principles of interior design, photography, videography, business office communications, networking, and cybersecurity operations and IT operations. All of those things, and then a few more that I think are very current for today's student.
I just think it's very fascinating too that at the secondary level, we certainly are continuing to evolve and add courses wherever necessary. And this is an example of
Great
that.
example. And as I said, early college is a great example of an innovative model.
Yes,
But our innovative models, all of them really do provide students and families the opportunity to accelerate their education. And we're certainly blessed because we have programs like that that are not offered anywhere else in this region. So we're
that is
very, very
correct.
blessed.
Yes, we certainly are. And that takes us then to last night's consent items, if you
Yes.
will.
So 4.01 minutes of the July 25th meeting, as well as the executive session, those were approved. Item 4.02, consideration allowance of payments. And in that 2 week span of time, the allowance of payments totaled $7 million. So we like that number because that's lower than it typically is. 4.03, consideration approve the preliminary bond resolution and reimbursement resolution. So this really is an opportunity, and this is all done through legal counsel's advice, but it does provide us with the opportunity if we undertake certain projects because of the timeliness and supply chain considerations that I think everyone now acknowledges exist. If we undertake a project before we receive the proceeds from the bond sale, then we can pay ourselves back with the proceeds of the bond sale when we do get them for the work that we've done on those projects. 4.04, consideration to approve the renewal agreement with Edmentum. So this really is a very good digital program that allows us to individualize learning for math as well as for reading. It provides supplemental instruction, either for intervention, for remediation, or also for acceleration. And appreciate everyone's work on this. We actually were able to reduce the contract overall, and the funding source for this would be the IDOE High Ability Grant, as well as some ESSER funding. Going on to 4.05, consideration to approve the agreement with School Messenger, really for safe arrival. We're really excited about this, and Jason, you might want to talk a little bit more, but we have a longstanding relationship with School Messenger. Safe arrival allows our parents the convenience of either calling or entering in a platform or a mobile app the absence of their child, and then it is through the miracle of technology is put together, and then our schools have one point of access for the student absences.
Yeah, we are looking very forward to this. You're right, Dr. Smith. And this is part of the program that we use. It does our district website, our school websites, our phone, our text, or email notification system. So it's an add on to that. It's a feature they've had for some time now. And we've run across it and investigated it and thought it'd really be a great addition to attendance. And I think the important thing is it's going to help the user on both sides. It's going to help the school office with managing attendance, which, as you can imagine, is a big piece of making sure who is there and who's not, and keeping that data. And then it's going to be very user friendly for parents as well, as you said, for them to call in or to notify the school, especially if they have more than one child and more than one school. So, really looking forward to the benefits
Yeah.
of this.
So not often do we have a win-win situation, but I think this is
This
clearly one of
is
those. And
true.
just as a point of reference, we will not roll this out for the start of the school year. We will
Correct.
roll this out a little bit later. Do you want to give folks
Yeah, I
additional
think
information?
what the plan is right now, they're going to look at training office staff in the schools because there will be a slight learning curve there at the very end of this month. And then, really, as this rolls into September, that's going to be the perfect time. September has always been Attendance Awareness Month. So, it's a great time then to start highlighting this program and communicating that to all of our families. At the same time, we're really focused on school attendance because, as we've always said, the cliche, empty seats don't learn. So, we want to make sure people are in attendance every day possible.
Very good. Well said. Moving on to item 4.06, consideration to approve the donation of a surplus bus to Boom Squad. So Boom Squad reached out and to see if they could secure one of our surplus buses, and we had provided one for them several years ago. We did have a surplus bus that we were happy to donate to them. There's a process that we have to follow. So this was that process that was approved by the board last night.
Really another win-win. You just said that,
Yep.
and I mean, this is another example of that.
4.07, consideration to approve the change order number 1 with Dye Brothers for Central High School. This is basically for some damage that was discovered after they were starting the renovation there. Then it was not discoverable until they removed some of the product. So that is why that change order was put in place. And if we go then to 4.08, consideration to approve the change order number one for raise your floor covering for Highland Elementary School. So as we were installing new carpet at Highland, we have some risers in our kindergarten classrooms. And when we went to remove the carpet, the glue was so strong that it lifted
Mm.
some of the plywood up of the risers. So this basically was installing new plywood and then going over the old carpeting with new plywood and then going over the new plywood with new carpeting.
And boy, as we're replacing floor covering in our schools, I know we were just at Highland yesterday. It looks fantastic.
It really does, yeah. Then moving on to 4.09, this is an exciting program that we are able to offer our students at Bosse, once again, as an accelerator. This is a 4T program with Toyota Motor Manufacturing of Indiana, specifically for our students at Bosse or other students that would want to go to Bosse to take advantage of this program. But this was really brought about by the EVSC Foundation and Toyota's Foundation. But EVSC is going to transport students up to Toyota a few times a week. So then we needed to come along and make certain that we were a partner in this process just for insurance purposes.
And that wraps up consent, takes us into personnel recommendations.
So as I always say at this time, the personnel recommendations are there for your perusal, and we would encourage you to do so.
And just as you're saying that, I don't even know if we mentioned that today with consent items, everything there at your perusal as well. Lots of links you can click on for every bit of documentation. So we encourage
Absolutely.
you to do that.
Going
If you're
back to
interested.
2008.
Anytime. It is all right there for you.
Correct.
So good point. And that takes us then, Dr. Smith, to core curriculum and student development. And that brings us to our special guest, one of two special guests we have today on the Recap Podcast, Carrie Hilliard, our Chief Transformation Officer. Welcome.
Thank you for having me today.
We're very glad to have you. So, I know this is something that is near and dear to your heart, but it is such, as Dr. Smith and I have said frequently, such a part of the EVSC's culture, and that is continuous improvement. And you have been instrumental in that, along with a large team of individuals. And so we just thought you could come in and share with us a little bit about that. You did a presentation for the board to update them last night as well, and be a great time for you to share that today.
Yeah, I'd love to. So, this year we have been really focusing in on this journey of being better together. So, it's been a collaborative improvement journey. We have been implementing a framework called Create that's out of KMBR Education. And every letter in Create stands for a distinct step in our journey to go about solving complex problems with new ways of thinking. So that really means working with a lot of different stakeholders, from field experts out in our schools and our community, as well as the end users of the different types of processes we implement day to day in our schools. So, one of the first things we did in launching off our Create process, which happened last October, we trained our core team of facilitators, and then we publicly launched in November. You might remember we did the Better Together Shared Vision, Mission, and Values Week. That was a community wide visioning process. We asked everyone across the entire community to share with us what values matter to you. What do you want to see in your K 12 public education school system? And we asked questions such as even what should be true for every student who graduates from Evansville Vanderburgh School Corporation to really determine what those vision and our mission and values were.
So let me ask you this, Carrie, while you're going through this. Why is it so important for a district like us to get stakeholder feedback? Because that's really what you're talking about here, reaching out, getting information from people.
Yeah, and I think that's the difference of something like improvement versus transformation. To really have systemic level transformation, you've got to have everybody working in the same direction, and you've got to have a common set of values and a common vision that's driving that work together.
Okay. All right.
So, yeah, you'll even see in this image, this is Dr. Owen in central office who was welcoming back new teachers and new to EVSE teachers. Again, just welcoming everyone to our family, but also making sure we're anchoring everything we do back to that vision, mission, and core values. That was an important part of this work. So I want to thank everybody from the community who participated in that. We heard from nearly 2,000 individuals across the community, from students to parents to employees, community leaders, community partners. It was a tremendous turnout in that process and really helped us guide our work.
So really, what this was not, or what this is not, is a small group of people sitting around a table in an office somewhere coming up with all this. I mean, this is truly driven from the feedback, from the conversations taking place across so many different areas.
It really is. Yeah. It's been a wonderful collaborative process. You'll see on this image. This launched us then into the R part of Create framework, which is research. And really, what that means is learning from others. That's where you start. So, we did a tremendous number of empathy interviews. We did a lot of focus groups and collaborative sessions where we really took time to listen as learners and really understand the different stories and perspectives that exist across our community to help us get better. And again, this focus on getting better together. So we spent several months on the research part of that, which was a tremendous learning experience for us.
Dr. Smith, I'm going to ask you while Carrie's going through this. I mean, as you're sitting there hearing about continuous improvement, I know you're a vital part of this as well. Why is that so important from your vantage point as the superintendent for our organization?
I think there are several factors. I think everybody wants everyone to get better, but yet when having the desire does not translate into actionable steps, and we certainly need all schools in the nation to continue to get better. But I think more importantly, it is so easy to fall into the trap of maintaining the status quo. And one of the sayings that you've heard me say numerous times is every system is perfectly designed to get the results that it currently gets. Well, if we want better results, but yet we're kind of beholden to the status quo, then there is a disconnect there that I think this corporation is so forward thinking, and I might say transformational, in that we know in order to get better results, we have to be willing to undergo and to take on that improvement process, which can be somewhat painful at times because you have to be very, I think, introspectory or sorry about that.
I think what you're
Yeah,
trying to say is you have to really,
you,
I mean,
you have to lay
you got
yourself
to get
bare.
dirty. You got to get your hands
Right.
dirty, I
Yeah.
think is what you've said before.
And then when we listen to the public comments, not all of them are maybe comments that people would think that we would embrace, but the only way you can get better, is to address where you currently are.
Mhm.
And if it's a perception or if it's a reality, we need to hear those things so that we can continue to get better. Because at the end of the day, we are dedicated and we promise our community that we are firm in our commitment to continue to improve each and every day. Our students deserve that.
No, you're exactly right. They deserve nothing less than that. So, Carrie, pick up where you left off, please. This
Yeah,
is so
and that's a
fascinating.
beautiful segue. This is Samantha Potts, our social worker out at Kay's Elementary, in this image. And, just what Dr. Smith was saying, this idea of this humility that we came into the process with. We talked a lot about being vulnerable, leading as learners first, not as knowers. So we really did want to come in and take that opportunity to just listen, learn, be vulnerable, be practicing humility, and take that introspective look about the system level opportunities that we have for improvement. And then that's what happens, this opportunity for innovation, getting so many voices and different types of thinkers around the table that have lots of different lenses on how we can go about getting better together, just naturally happens when you bring all these individuals together that have that expertise. And next, we did definitely then, it's not just about pulling in the qualitative stories and the perception information that we gather from empathy interviews, but then we do want to go into the quantitative data. We do want to look and see what does the data show about this, or even go back and review our processes. And then that leads us to the A in Create, which is the assembly of ideas. And this is where you see a lot of individuals around the table working together to really think about how do we go about getting better. We would always honor individual process time and make sure everyone's individual perspectives were a critical part of the process. And then it would lead into collaborative discussion, co creation processes that would then result in proposing strategies at how we go about getting better as a school community.
I think one of my favorite things about your slide deck, I thought this last night as well, but just the pictures really do show the conversation taking place, the engagement taking place. People aren't just sitting listening to a presenter, but I mean they're truly sharing what they feel is necessary in this process.
Yeah, and we got a lot of great feedback that individuals who participated throughout the process really have felt heard. They felt like their voice was valued. And we're even hearing lots of feedback that I really feel like this is already helping us get better as a district community. So,
Perfect.
really appreciate that feedback from those who engaged in the process. And we look forward to continuing to work with our community and get better together. I do want to share just some of where this has led us so far. So, working with our community, we have identified 3 commitments for our continuous improvement process. Number 1 is learning and achievement for every student. Number 2 is family and community engagement. And number 3 is growing, supporting, and diversifying talent. Next, you'll notice we have also identified a theory of change for how we go about getting better together. And you'll notice this really encompasses a lot of what we've already talked about, but also drives us back towards that vision that we're trying to accomplish with regard to empowering students to thrive in life. And then again, we have also proposed strategies that have elevated from this process that line up with our vision, mission, values, that line up with our theory of change, and make sure to define and give us that structure for how we go about operationalizing this strategic plan. I will say that those strategies are available on board docs, as Dr. Smith was mentioning earlier. Anyone from the community is welcome to get on there and read more about what has been proposed throughout this process. So that's available for anyone in the public to view.
Yeah, if you're interested in it, we'd love for you to take a look, take a
Yeah.
deeper dive into it.
And then finally, I'll wrap up with the last part of our create process before we cycle and do the full continuous improvement process is the T, and then the second E in create for test and effect. So we will continue to measure, monitor not only how are we doing, but are we on track to making the impact that we want to see towards that vision? And if not, how do we refine as we go? We really want to make sure this is truly a continuous improvement process and journey that we're working on with our community as we go. So I do look forward to being able to provide future updates. We want to continue this process and continue cycling through the create process as we go for all the different strategies that are involved in our plan.
You know, I think one of the most exciting things about this is that Dr. Smith, what Carrie is referring to today, is not just going to get put on a shelf, to use an older term, but this really is a living, breathing, ongoing process that's going to continue for the foreseeable future.
It absolutely is. The analogy that I've used in the past that I think people can get a really good visual image of is a ship on an ocean. When you hoist the sail, you're either going to direct where you go based upon the position of that sail in the wind, or you're going to hoist the sail and just be at the beck and call of wherever the wind takes you. Our strategic plan, our continuous improvement process is the guiding tool based upon voluminous research and work and effort and input from the community to make certain that we are going in the direction that everyone agrees is the most beneficial for all of our students.
Carrie, this takes a tremendous amount of time from so many people, but yourself included with that, no doubt. So thank you very much for all of this work, and thanks for taking the time to come in today and share this with us.
Thank you for having me.
And that then, Dr. Smith, takes us into last night's information items.
Yes, so going on with information item 7.01, policy review. Our Chief of Staff, Rick Cameron, presented that, and that is a change to some of the definitions that we have in our bylaws. Moving on to item 7.02, consideration of the adult school meal prices. We are required to annually review and adjust our adult meal prices based upon the free reimbursement rate for that year. So based upon that calculation, the adult lunch price is going to increase 25 cents, and the breakfast price for adults will increase 20 cents for this upcoming school year. And then information item 7.03, consideration of the agreement with Riverside Insights. This is really product called Easy CBM that our teachers are going to utilize for progress monitoring when it comes to interventions and making certain that our students get the perfect amount of supports for wherever they happen to be in their academic pursuits.
Okay. And that was the first three items on information last night. Taking us to item 7.04, presentation on the 2023 budget. We have another special guest, Dr. Carl Underwood, our Assistant Superintendent of Business and Human Resources. Thank you, sir, for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
So last night, Dr. Underwood, you did a presentation on the upcoming budget. So I know we've got some slides to share. So if you don't mind just taking us through these slides then.
Sure, be glad to. So, in looking at it last night was their first presentation to the Board of School Trustees, and it's a similar format that we've gone over in prior years. Before starting, I just wanted to thank Courtney Bolivar, our Executive Director of Business Affairs, our budget specialist, for putting everything together. She's a recognized leader in finance around the state, so a big thank you to her.
I mean, this is an ongoing process. You and your team and Courtney work on this really throughout the year.
It really is a 12-month process, yes. And so looking at it, we first go over our budget assumptions when putting this budget together, and really it holds to enrollment, and we kept enrollment flat from the prior year. And then moving on, we looked at what our education fund revenue sources are, and this is our basic tuition support, and this is the money that we receive from the state of Indiana for our students that are in our school. And there are factors that go in that. We receive monies for honors diplomas, also for special education based upon student exceptionality, and vocational education based upon course. And when you attach dollar figures to that, the amount of money that we are expecting to receive from the state is just over $170 million. Combine that with miscellaneous state and local revenue, that would be money that we would receive for summer school reimbursement or money we receive for students that attend our Career and Technical Education Center, bringing that total to just over $172 million.
And I'd like to interject because people might think, well, why do you pull out summer school reimbursement? It's important for folks to understand that we don't receive an allocation for that. We expend the money and then we ask for reimbursement. So the state does not give us a budget for that. That's why it is held outside of that $170 million amount.
And included in our miscellaneous revenue, correct.
Thank you.
Then we started to talk about permissible expenditures out of the education fund. And there are two categories prescribed by the state, and they have to do with academic achievement and student support. And examples of those expenditures would be money that we spend on people, our teachers and principals and nurses and secretaries and all those expenses that take care of our kids. And then to illustrate, there's a pie chart breakdown here. And when you add up the salaries and wages and the fringes, the money that we spend on our people in our education fund is over 98% of the total. So just want to highlight that, and we always bring that attention to the member of the Board of School Trustees as well as the people in the audience, that the money that we receive from the state is spent on our people.
And I think that is important to lift. You were probably going to say this too, Dr. Smith, because you do hear people saying how much of your money is going to the classroom.
Right. So of $157 million, 98% of that goes directly to teachers and counselors and nurses, those things that impact the classroom. So $157 million, 154.6, I believe, are spent directly in the classroom.
Which is where we want to be.
Absolutely.
That's correct.
All right.
Then we go to our operations fund, and our operations fund is funded by local property taxes, which we receive an increase based upon the Department of Local Government Finance increase. It was 5% this year.
And all taxing entities receive that same increase.
The same 5%.
Now, it also changes year after year, and this was the highest amount that I can ever recall we've received.
It's the highest amount that I've received.
That any governmental entity receives.
That's correct. So in looking at it, it's made up primarily of local property taxes, but also miscellaneous taxes. Local revenue sources would be revenue we receive for like our daycare or we care program. And then education fund transfers. That's money that when we switched to the education and operations fund, we used to have state money that supported some of the expenses that were housed in the general fund. Those have been moved over to the operations fund, but the revenue didn't go with it. So we are allowed to transfer revenue from the education fund to support those expenditures in the operations
I'd like
fund.
to just interject that this was not something that EVSC did. This was something that the state required of all school districts in the state.
That's correct.
So to kind of simplify for someone listening, Dr. Underwood, you and your team spend all of this time putting a budget together, but there are a lot of rules and regulations you all have to follow as you're putting the budget together.
Yes, absolutely.
And we've talked about the auditing process before, and you have to make sure you're doing what the state law says you're going to do.
Lots of oversight from different agencies around the state.
Okay.
Then looking at the expenditures in the operations fund for overhead and non-operational examples would be operations, things that you would normally think of that would take care to support running a business, our daycare, our insurance, utilities, as well as vendor services. The pie chart breakdown is, again, we illustrate or bring highlight to members of the public that we're still spending about 70% of the money that we receive in the operations fund on people in salaries and fringes.
Because in EVSC, we're very blessed that we have a lot of individuals working on the operations side who are very skilled at what they do. They're not in the classroom, but they're doing the behind the scenes work, and that falls under the operations
That's
category.
right.
Yes, we're service related in industry. So food service, when you think of capital projects, when you think of buses, all of those things, they just don't show up. Lots of people have to work in a very collaborative manner to make certain that we provide the best services that we can possibly provide for our students.
Most definitely.
And then moving on to the capital projects plan, Daryl Angermeyer and his team are required to put together a 3-year plan. And in that plan, it really highlights things that we would like to do across the district to support EVSC. And that would be renovations, building construction, maintenance, regular maintenance. Also, there's an allowance to pay for technology and people that support technology out of the capital projects plan, and that is listed in there as well.
And we've been known for many, many years of taking so much pride in putting such a focus on the technology aspect to support our students and the facilities where they learn to make sure they're in top-notch facilities.
Absolutely. Then when you look at attaching dollar figures to the capital projects plan, it costs out just over $29 million. Most of that is listed under construction and improvements, but there are statutory provisions in there as well. Utilities, for example, is at $4.6 million. That has been in statute for many, many years, as well as skilled labor at $1 million. Which brings us to transportation fund, which is also housed in the operations fund. Our operating budget for transportation is at just over $15 million. Our bus replacement is based upon a 5-year replacement plan that Mike Menzel and his team put together, and it calls for, based upon the plan, $11.3 million. Even though we know that we would never receive that amount, that's what the plan would call for.
So when we talk about that's what the plan would call for, you're talking about the eligibility of a bus to be replaced.
Based upon that plan.
Based upon the state definition, the state requirements.
That's right.
So that's not something that we have a whole lot of latitude in. If we have a bus that meets the criteria for replacement in that 5-year plan, it goes on the list, and that's what generated the budget, if you will, of $11+ million. But we know we're not going to receive that much money to replace buses.
That's right. This is a look at the 5-year plan and what the plan would call for, totaling up at just over $11.3 million. Next would be the Art Institute Fund, again housed within the Operations Fund. This funding, the Board of School Trustees has chosen to fund the Arts Council of Southwestern Indiana, and the budget for that is $375,000. And the Historical Society Fund, also in the Operations Fund, the funding of which goes to the Bosse Field Historical Society, and the budget is also $375,000. Our Debt Service Fund is listed this year at $12.3 million, which is down from last year, a couple of $100,000. And our exempt debt service, which is our referendum from several years ago, is listed at $16.5 million this year. The Rainy Day Fund, we bring this to the Board of Trustees for approval every year. We're asking for authority to spend monies in the Rainy Day Fund, but we are not asking for new monies. The money that is shown here is money that we already have in our account. We're just asking for the authority to spend should we need to.
And the reason why we do that is if we would find ourselves in a position where we would need to spend money from the rainy day fund, we don't have permission to do that from the state. So it's about a 6-week process. So if you would imagine having an emergency fund that you need to spend money from, but then having to wait 6 weeks in order to get permission to spend money from that, that would be a little bit problematic. So that's why we just go through the process now while we're having our budget approved already, to include that there is no expectation, no thinking that we're actually going to utilize those funds this year.
It's a recommended practice from the Department of Local
Right.
Government Finance.
Right.
And I like the way you just said that, Dr. Underwood, because so much of what we do, you're following best practice guidance from the Department of Government Finance.
We work very closely with our state representatives to do just that.
Okay, very good.
This slide illustrates on the left column our advertised budget. And again, following practice from the Department of Local Government Finance, we advertise our budgets high. In the right-hand column, we just bring attention to the anticipated funding. And I always point down to the rainy day fund as an example. We're advertising a budget of $8.9 million, but we're not anticipating any funding because we already have those dollars in the account.
In fact, we can assure the public we will not receive a dollar for the rainy day fund. Those are funds that we've already saved.
Those are funds that we've already saved, correct. And then also going back to bus replacement, based upon the 5-year replacement plan, we would be eligible for $11.3 million, but we know in reality we're probably going to receive just over $3 million. And finally, just the next step. So last night was the first presentation to the Board of School Trustees. It'll be followed up by a board meeting, a public hearing, and then followed by adoption at the end of September.
And then that is the budget process that is kind of spelled out that you follow. So like you said, presenting it, coming back for a public hearing, and then approval by the board end of September. So, I mean, it really does wrap up an extremely long period of work and so much dedication. So we appreciate everything you've done. But I know you worked so closely with Dr. Underwood and his team, Dr. Smith, to make sure that this happens the way it needs to happen to educate our students.
You bet. A lot of respect for what Dr. Underwood and what Courtney Bolieber do. They are acknowledged as experts and go-to people in the state. And just want to not have question and answer here, but just kind of want to reiterate a few things. So in our funding formula, that is a fixed funding formula, and really the driver of that are the pupils that we have, the students that we have. And the number that we would have in honors programs, the number that we would have that receive special ed services, the number of students that we have in vocational ed. There's really nothing we can do to get more money or less money. That's based upon the students that choose us.
The General Assembly sets the dollar figure, and then it's based upon the number of students that we have
Right.
in the district.
And then the second thing that you mentioned was growth quotient. And that's something that I really wasn't aware of until I was in a position to actually deal with those kind of financial matters. The growth quotient is a percent of increase that is determined by the Department of Local Government Finance, and it is the same for any governmental agency in the state.
Correct.
So there have been many years where it's been in the 2% range or whatever. So the city council would receive that, county council would receive that, the school districts would receive that. And then that is what it is. We don't get more, we don't get less. That it basically is what they determine that we will receive.
Whether the budget is high enough or not, you will still receive those monies.
Yeah. So the point I wanted to make certain that everybody knew, just like your household budget, many times there aren't many ways for you to increase your household budget. It might actually be easier to increase your household budget than it would be our budget. It is what it is for our budget. So we reallocate dollars within our budget according to the priorities that are set forth by the board. But I just want to give folks kind of a really easy to understand example that really resonates with me. Back when I was in school, well, I will admit that was a few decades ago. As a student, we had chalkboards in every one of our classroom. Some of those chalkboards were 50, 60 years old, and it really didn't take a whole lot to maintain a chalkboard. Well, fast forward now, we expect all of our students to be able to not only be taught by technology and the latest in technology, but also be able to incorporate and utilize technology. So the interactive boards that we have in each one of our 1,500 classrooms are very expensive. We do have access to some funds through the state in the cost or in the fashion of a low-cost loan, if you would, for the technology itself. However, the people that it takes to service those technological gems that we have in our classroom and all of our 23,000 computers that are student computers, as well as all the devices that our employees have. We don't have additional funding for the people, for the personnel that it takes to make all of that work, much less the wireless and the access points and everything that we have. So I think that's just an example as things have changed over the decades and where our money goes to now. There are things now that, because of the dynamic that we have with the utilization of technology, that are really, we're blessed that we get the technology at a pretty low cost in terms of a 1% loan, but the people that are associated with it still are an increased cost that we didn't have 20 years ago. So that's just a small example of how we've had to reallocate funding to the current environment that we have.
Okay, makes complete sense. I mean, you can't support technology if you don't have the people there
Right.
to maintain and support that. So, well, Dr. Underwood, we appreciate you coming in, sharing this not only with the board last night, but with us on this podcast today. A lot of good information here. It's on the website, so people can go back
Yes.
and they can see everything you've gone through. And so if they have any questions, that should be able to answer them. And then, of course, as you said, you lined out the rest of the process, taking you to the end of September, where hopefully things will be approved and we'll have a budget in place. So thank you very much.
Appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Smith, that takes us to continued business.
Yes, so for continued business, as is our custom, I let the public know what occurred during the town hall. Once again, that's a great opportunity for patrons to come in and have two-way dialogue with their board members. Then also did a brief recap of the start of school, and then ended with the update of the construction projects that our facilities folks have undertaken over the summer months. Deep cleaned 3.8 million square feet of our schools, and then 2 pages of updates of the work that they've accomplished on behalf of our students and our staff at all of our 40 schools.
It was a most impressive list when you went through it last night.
They do a phenomenal job.
Yes, they do, and our students deserve it. So, and that wraps up today's podcast, Dr. Smith, and we're looking forward to continuing with the rest of this week, seeing the rest of our students come back to school.
It's going to be a great week.
Thank you.